Alright, welcome to the channel, and if you're new, what I do is I tell you the encounters and then I show you the locations. So if you like those kind of videos, you might as well go ahead and subscribe right now. For today's video, I have two reports. The first one from a small town called Elkwater, West Virginia, where a deer hunter falls asleep in his deer stand only to be woken up by something underneath his deer stand eating his food scraps. It turns out to be a young Sasquatch, and then the Papa Sasquatch comes and they get into an argument and the hunter hears the whole thing. It's crazy, wait until you guys hear it. And then the second report is from a skeptic who happened to be driving on a lonely road in British Columbia with his sister and a friend in the middle of the winter, 40 degrees below zero wind chill, and something walks across the road. He gives a description and he says how it has changed him. Wait till you hear it. Alright, let's go ahead and get into these. Randolph County, West Virginia, November 1989. It happened in 1989 on a hunting trip in the middle region of West Virginia. We were on our yearly deer hunting trip in the remote mountainous area of Randolph County. I was about 24 years old and was on leave from the military on the family hunting trip. My family and friends have hunted the area for many years, and I was very comfortable and familiar with the area. The road back had not been traveled for years and was very washed out and overgrown with brush. It was about 7 or 8 miles back before we came to the impassable areas of the road, and it was then that we geared up and proceeded on foot. I would estimate we had gone about another 2 or 3 miles on foot before we reached the crest of the mountain and decided to find our hunting spots. The light had just begun to peek over the mountaintop when I cleared my spot and settled in. I had worked up a pretty good sweat on the steady pace up the mountain, so it was not too long after settling and listening to the first morning light waking up the rest of the forest, I began to nod off to sleep. After going in and out a few times, I decided to get up and move around a little to try to wake myself up. After about 20 minutes of walking around, I stumbled on a very old wooden tree stand. I could tell it had been there for many years. I remember thinking it was in the best spot, overlooking the very visible and open woods just under the crest of the hilltop. Not too long after, I ate the apples and oranges I had brought. After a while, the warm morning sun took its toll on me, and I nodded off again. A bad smell woke me right up. The forest was completely quiet around me, and all I could think of was what the hell was that awful smell. As I became more alert, I could hear the slight rustling below me and what I thought was some faint grunts or whines. I decided it was time to lean over and get a visual on it. It was about 25 feet below me on the slope and directly in front of the stand. It was not aware of my presence above it. It was about 5 feet tall, with long, dark, reddish-brown hair. The hair from its head down to its body was of equal length, about 2 to 3 inches long. The hair went down its arms and hands as well as its feet. I could barely see fingernails and toenails. Not claws, but nails like a human. Most of its hair was tangled and matted in spots as if it had wallowed the ground or a tree or something. I watched it smelling the orange peels and the apple core, then tasting them. It looked around at one point as if to wonder where they may have come from. I wondered how long it would be before it became aware of my presence and what it would do when it did. Then I heard the rustling coming down from the top of the hill, loud rustling, and I could tell something was coming at a pretty rapid speed. I saw the one below me turn and look in the direction of the noise. It froze for a few seconds and looked almost like a statue. I could not see at this point what was coming down the hill. I was leaning to my right and looking down. I tried to move my eyes to the left, but my view was blocked by the trees that was holding up my stand and partially by the full brim hat I was wearing. I kept my eyes moving between the one below me and the direction of the disturbance coming down the hill. As it moved towards our position, it began to make noises like I have never heard before. I would ordinarily not be able to describe the noise, but I have read where other people have described it as a recording being played backward. I would have to say that is a very close description. It is as if it were speaking a language, but nothing like I have ever heard before. The one below me sprang to its feet and then moved about 15 to 20 feet to the right of me. It moved very rapidly, kind of between a run and a leap, all on its feet though. It did not use its arms. It then started to bellow back at the one coming down the hill, and it sounded almost like they were arguing. That is the impression that it left with me anyway. It wasn't until the one above me came into clear view that I started to feel very scared. Yeah, no kidding. As it came into my immediate area, it moved towards the first one and began to slow to what seemed to be very cautious movements. Its attention seemed to move between the first creature and its surrounding areas. I felt at this moment that it was alert to my presence. The second one was much larger than the first, and it seemed very irritated. The bigger one was covered in very dark hair, almost black. It was very muscular, and its arms were noticeably long. It stood with a slight bend, but in upright posture. It had to be 8 to 9 feet tall. It was much larger than a human. As these two creatures squabbled or communicated back and forth, their gestures were extremely human-like. I was under the impression that the larger of the two was scolding the smaller one. They moved about 40 to 50 feet to the right of me. At this point, the larger one had its back to me. I could make out facial features of the smaller one. It had very human-like features, but different nose. Hair covered most of its face, but it looked to be thin hair, not like the rest of it. Then the smaller creature spotted me, because it went into a crouched and then squatting position and looked up in my direction. Their chattering began to quiet, and then the larger one, with its back still to me, went into a squatting position for a few seconds. The smaller one then began to howl and bellow very loudly. The larger one, with its back still towards me, began to howl very loud also. The larger creature then pushed the smaller one, and the smaller one sprang to its feet and rapidly ran off across the hill to my right. It ran in long, leaping strides and moved very fast like nothing I had ever seen. I never noticed it to ever look back. As the smaller one ran, the larger one stood up and slowly turned towards me. It had its arm bent above its forearm as if it were shading or hiding its eyes. It stood very straight and tall and looked directly at my tree stand. All of the fear from before overcame me again, and I prayed that the thing did not try to come up my tree. I thought for an instant that I would yell at it, jerk or jump, or maybe even frighten it away, but I could not bring myself to move. I could not even bat an eye. I could feel my legs starting to shake, and I became very hot all over. For an instant, I thought I was going to pass out or become physically ill. For a brief moment, it was looking right at my face. From what I could see, it had a very large human-like eyes and very large round nostrils. I could not make out lips because of the hair on its face, but I would guess that they were thin because the hair did not stick out. It did not have much of a protruding mouth or jaw like an ape. It had a fairly flat face like a human. It put its arms to its side and began to look around. It swiveled at the hips and looked in every direction. After a quick glance back at me, it then began to walk off in the direction the smaller one had gone. It did not run or act scared at all. It made very long howls as it walked and turned a few times and looked in my direction as it walked away. I watched it and listened until it became just a black figure moving through the woods. I could hear it howl and bellow for a few more minutes. Then I heard what sounded like something beating a tree or log with a limb or stick or something. After about 30 minutes, I decided that if it meant to do me harm, it already had the chance, and it was probably safe to get down and out of the tree stand. I made my way back towards my friend that I had left earlier in the morning. I never even thought to check the ground for evidence or anything. After about an hour, I walked up on my friend and could see his blaze orange through the trees. I very carefully made my way in his direction. As I approached him, I could see that he was staring straight at me. He was sitting against some downed trees and he did not move a muscle. As I walked closer to him, I smiled and asked him if he had seen anything. He was very pale and I could tell he was a little scared and puzzled, and then he answered to me that he was not sure what he had saw. I jokingly said, "You look like you saw a Bigfoot," and he jumped to his feet and asked, "Did you see it too?" I nodded to him yes. Then he began to tell me what he saw. Apparently, the larger creature had moved across the hill in front of him, crashing through the trees about 40 to 50 yards away. He said at first he thought it was a bear, but after observing it, he could plainly see that it was moving very fast and walking upright like a man. I said we should try to track the two creatures, but it really didn't take much for him to talk me out of it. This really happened 16 years ago in Randolph County, West Virginia. I have never returned to that area of the woods. Alright, with this next report, I also have the follow-up investigative report, which adds a lot more detail. Winter, 1969, British Columbia, the Hope-Princeton Highway. Hello there. I would like to share with you an experience I once had regarding a creature in whose existence that up to that time I was extremely skeptical of, to say the least. I am no longer a skeptic. In fact, I am now a true believer in the ever-elusive ape-man creature of the Pacific Northwest, known as a Sasquatch. Picture this. I am driving from Hope to Princeton with my sister and a friend. The year is 1969, in winter. There was a wisp of very dry snow blowing low across the road in front of us. It is about 3 a.m., not a house or a light or a car around for miles. And one of those nights that is so cold that the person wouldn't even stop for a quick bathroom break, for fear of turning into a human ice cube. One thing for sure, as there is no snowballs in hell, and that is we are not apt to see some fool out there at this time of night in this kind of cold, and in this isolated location, running around in a monkey suit. What happened next is etched in my mind for all time. A creature, definitely not a bear, and even more definitely not a human, walked across the road from left to right. Starting from the time it came into view of my headlights until it went out of my view of lights was about 6 to 8 seconds. I stopped right where I thought the exact spot that he had crossed. We saw no more of him. I, needless to say, did not get out to investigate this creature, as I was riveted with the combination of fear and a strange sense of almost giddy euphoria of a nature that is hard to describe. We sat there for a few minutes asking each other if we actually saw what we saw, or were we all crazy. We decided finally to believe that we saw what we saw, and what we saw was a creature well over a height of a tall man, say 7 to 8 feet, kind of grayish in color with very long arms, thick torso, slanted back ape-like forehead, walking with long, deliberate like strides. At one point he turned in our direction, but not as a person would by merely turning the head, but by turning the upper part of the upper body as well. The only video I have of this is stored in the memory of my mind. I would like to say only to the few people out there that have had an experience like mine, that my heart goes out to you in knowing that, like me, you can't share it with your friends or family or anyone, because you know that even if they tell you that they do believe what you say you saw, you know deep inside they do not. Oh well, I don't begrudge these people, because I know that being a skeptic myself, and if the tables were turned, I would be and was a non-believer. Now, I do believe. Alright, here comes the investigative report. I talked extensively with the witness about his report. Even though it happened over 30 years ago, he recounted everything as though it had happened yesterday. The witness said, I have seen a lot of so-called pictures of these things, and nothing out there looks like what I had seen that night. The subject that the witness viewed was more of a Neanderthal-looking creature, grayish-brown color, no more than 8 feet in height. The witness said, I was a skeptic before and now believe in the existence of something that has remained unseen by many. Witness stated that he has talked to his sister over the years. Her memory has sort of faded this incident out. This could be because she did not get the view that I did. She was the passenger in the car, and I was behind the wheel, where my focus was on the road, the witness said. He also stated the other witness in the vehicle did not view the subject as clearly, as he believes that he had been sleeping. The subject seemed to be well built with little body fat. The witness said when it turned to look at us, it used its body, not just the head turned. This was for about 3 strides, and then it turned back in the direction it was walking and disappeared from my view. The witness also said, there is no way, absolutely no way, that this creature could have been someone in a suit. The temperature was approximately minus 40 degrees with the wind chill. There were no homes, lights, or structures in the area. To this day, there is nothing in that area. Alright, so there you have it. Could you imagine being in a deer stand like that and hearing those creatures talk like that? That would just send shivers up my spine. I don't know about you guys, but hearing something weird like that out in the middle of the woods when you're by yourself, wow. And then how about the skeptic? Imagine that. You go from a skeptic to a knower, basically. That happens to a lot of people. There's still a lot of skeptics out there, but once they see this creature, they are instantly changed. If you guys like the video, make sure you hit the like button for me. That really helps me a lot. Leave me some comments below. Let me know what you thought about these reports. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. The button's right here. If anybody out there has a Bigfoot encounter they'd like to share, you can always email it to me at willstarbigfoot@aol.com. That's where we're going to leave it. Always remember, where there is a Willstar, there is definitely a way. Willstar out.